Good morning. This is the regularly scheduled executive committee meeting. The date is November 5th, 2019. My name is Jacob Fry. I'm the chair of this committee, and I am joined by a quorum of council members Bender, Jenkins, and Johnson. Let the record reflect that we do have a quorum. We have 3 items on the agenda for today: the interim designation of city attorney, reappointment of director for CPED, and the reappointment of director of public works. The first item on the agenda, of course, is the interim designation, designating Eric Nielsen as interim city attorney beginning November 23rd, 2019, for a period not to exceed 90 days, as our present city attorney, Susan Siegel, has been appointed to be the Court of Appeals judge, which is a really big deal, and we're really proud of her. So I will go ahead and move this first item on the agenda. Is there any discussion with respect to Mr. Nielsen? Council President.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to thank you, Mr. Nielsen, for stepping into this role. I spend a lot of time with the city attorney as the president, dealing with closed sessions, and my office facilitates all the, having council office representation at the mediations. Sort of all of the big legal questions that are coming through the council start with my office. So I really look forward to working with you in this role. I've gotten the chance to work with you as chair of ZMP, which you staffed as the attorney for so long. So I just wanted to thank you because it's a big job. And Susan, we're just going to miss you so much. So we'll save that whole sob story for another day. But I wanted to take the time to thank Mr. Nielsen for taking on this important role.
I'm also really thankful to have you. You've done an extraordinary job in the civil division. You always know that when you come to you with a question that you're going to provide quick and solid feedback, and that has been reflected for quite some time. If there's no further, Councilmember Andrew Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I just want to echo those sentiments as well. And I see this 90 days, not to exceed 90 days. I'd just throw it out there that I'd even be interested in seeing that a little longer, not knowing your process, though, around appointment. I hope we keep that in mind as well, making sure that you have the time to be able to feel like you find the best possible next city attorney. And I hope among those candidates that Eric Nielsen also would be open to that. So I'm just going to throw that out there publicly as well.
Thank you, council member. I don't know how Mr. Nielsen would feel about that, but if we haven't found one yet, we can certainly extend. Seeing no further discussion, all those in approval, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no, and that item passes. Item number 2 is the reappointment of the Director for Community Planning and Economic Development, and is considering my nomination to reappoint David Frank to the appointed position of Director of CPED, and Executive Director of Minneapolis Community Planning Development Agency for a 2-year period beginning January 2nd, 2020. And I will go ahead and move that item. Is there any discussion on that topic? There is one? Council Vice President.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Wow, I was a little surprised to hear about this, and I understand that there is a formal review that's being scheduled for Director Frank, and so I would move that we delay this reappointment conversation until such time as that review has occurred and Mr. Frank is here for the discussion.
Council President.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Mr. Mayor. I support the delay. I haven't had a sit down with the director of CPED prior to this day in order to talk through the how things are going and what we might expect in the next 2 years. I would expect that to occur before being asked to vote to move this forward. And have been working with Mr. Ruff on these scheduling with the reviews that Council Vice President mentioned. I think we can accommodate a schedule if that is the desire for any of these department directors that may be coming forward like this. But I think that's a reasonable request to ask that those happen as well.
I will be voting no on this particular amendment, as I do believe that 6 whole weeks is adequate time in order to schedule a review request for changes and progress to be made during the next 2-year term and then ultimately approve. And so that is the reason I will be voting no. Is there any further discussion on this item? Councilmember Andrew Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll support the delay because I understand the process concerns and wanting the executive committee to play a more impactful role on consideration of appointments. I would say that, I would, for consistency's sake, say that that is also the case as well that we have for our Director of Public Works, which is the next item. So I'm not sure if you want a separate motion on that around a delay, or if we should move that in with this one. I'm happy to amend the motion, but I guess I'd look at the chair.
Why don't we vote on this particular one, and then we can move to the second one on Public Works, if that works.
Thank you.
So any further discussion on this item? All those in a Councilmember Gordon.
I appreciate it. I just wanted to put on the table that the fact that the executive committee is having this kind of conversation indicates to me that there may be some concerns that need to be dug into and addressed in terms of the CPAD leadership, or maybe how it's been going for the last couple years. This feels a little bit unusual, and I think it'll be really important that Mr. Frank has an opportunity to meet with the council members and that we do that review. So it may be different than other typical appointments in that way, because this doesn't necessarily come up all the time. I'm also curious about the term doesn't end until the end of the year. Is that correct? So I think we also have plenty of time to do that work as well and take our time with it. So I'm supportive almost as much because it's just deferring to my colleagues and their concerns that they have to do due diligence, and I think that's always a good idea.
Thank you. Mr. Gordon, Councilmember Gordon, any further discussion on that item? Again, I'll be voting no, as I do believe that 6 weeks is adequate time to reflect, to schedule meetings, and then to ultimately go through a review process. In terms of these meetings, I think it's important that we attend them, that we communicate, and then we arrive at a decision. And it's best even to arrive at that and to communicate and to attend the meetings prior to the executive committee meeting. So all those in favor of this particular item, please say aye.
Aye.
I'm sorry. This is on the amendment. All those in particular in favor for the amendment, please say aye.
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 All those opposed say no. No. And that that amendment passes. And so then we are delayed on that item, that first item, at least for one cycle. The third one is the reappointment of the Director of Public Works. For the second item? For the third item? Council President.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do think it's, maybe I'll ask the clerks if we're not time specific in a delay, that it'll just come back to the next exec committee meeting, and I wonder if that's enough time.
Mr. Chair, Madam President, if the committee doesn't indicate a date, this would stay on the committee's agenda until such time as the committee takes action to take it off the agenda. If there's not a date certain included in the postponement, the item will come back at each meeting until the committee either takes action or schedules a specific date at which time it should come back. So without a date certain, it will come back at the next regular meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Carl. I'm fine without there being a date certain and then coming back, at least a default coming back at the next regular scheduled meeting. Are other council members okay with that?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's fine. I just don't know that there'll be enough time because Mr. Frank is not in town.
Councilmember Gordon.
I think that what that means is that the chair of the executive committee will have some discretion in setting the next agenda and working with staff. Or does it mean we have to take it up as a discussion item at the next meeting?
the item would stay on the council, on the committee's agenda until you either give us a date specific or until you take it off the agenda and act on it.
So as of right now, the item will stay on the agenda. If for some reason we need to extend it, we will then be able to. Council President.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think that's fine. I do, I guess I want to make an additional comment about that, if I may. I think our department directors do really incredible hard work for our city, and these are sensitive issues. I mean, any of us could say more right now publicly, but I think there's a strong desire from council members to be able to have these conversations directly with the folks who are in these roles. And so my concern was with it continuing to appear on an agenda, which is a public conversation. And I think it's fine procedurally if the item isn't ready to come forward in 2 weeks, that we know that we can delay it again. I'm just sensitive to the public nature of that continued delay. So that was why I asked the question.
Thank you, Council President. So as of right now, the default is that we continue on with the next one unless it is necessary to move beyond that. So the third item on the agenda is the reappointment of the Director of Public Works, considering my nomination to reappoint Robin Hutchison to the appointed position of Director of Public Works for a 2-year period beginning January 2nd, 2020. I'll go ahead and move that motion. Any discussion? Councilmember Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd go ahead and move a delay of that as well. I think that the same logic applies here, is that as an executive committee member, I want to be able to have that discussion with our department heads and our executive team, and I want to be able to have access to that review. And so I don't want this committee to be a rubber stamp. I want it to play an active role in these considerations, and I think by having a delay, we'll actually have more time to do that.
Councilmember Gordon.
Well, I can probably live with that, but I just wanted to note that I do appreciate that the mayor's actually brought forward some names at this time in November. It's earlier than I think we've seen in the past for these reappointments. It's good that we're getting ahead of this, and I do appreciate that. I think maybe we as the executive committee weren't doing our due diligence to make sure we're doing our 360 reviews and looking at these kinds of things and staying on top of it all. So we should think about this next time so that we make sure to have, I guess, the ground laid so by the time it gets to executive committee, we feel like we've vetted it pretty well. I'm almost willing to support the delay just because one of us wants to do it, and Councilmember Johnson raises a good point. But if we want to debate that issue, I'm happy to listen to the rest of my colleagues on it.
Council President.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, I will say there hasn't been a, Councilmember Gordon has been on the executive committee and on the council much longer than the rest of us, but in my time, there hasn't been one consistent way of doing department head reviews, and we did have a bit of a delay here this time because of the shift in coordinator. So there's been a discussion throughout the last number of months about getting those scheduled. They are now scheduled with the committee chairs. I believe Dr. Hutchinson's is in 2 weeks or 3 weeks. Mr. Franks is in 2 weeks. So they are happening. In the past, I mean, I think there's the formal review. There would have been if Councilmember Johnson had some concerns, he only had a few days to get that meeting scheduled, and other council members may have more flexible schedules. I know for me, my schedule is usually kind of packed. Today I have meetings back to back to back to back all day. So to sort of drop everything and schedule time with just a few days notice may be challenging for some council members. So I think I agree. I think it would be great if we had more time leading up to the next executive committee meetings, so that council members who are on this committee and want to reach out to any particular director ahead of time before this public discussion have the chance to be able to have those conversations in private.
Any further discussion on Councilmember Andrew Johnson's amendment? I appreciate the amendment, as I do believe that it is consistent with the motion that was previously made. I will also be voting against this amendment for the very same reason, though. On Councilmember Andrew Johnson's amendment, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no. No. And that amendment passes. I will go ahead. Do I need to make a motion to just keep it on the agenda, or it just stays there? Okay, so I don't need to make any motion. Both of these items, numbers 2 and 3, will be on the agenda for the next executive committee meeting. And given that we have no further business before us, we are adjourned. Thank you.